on my podcast, baby. It's a show where we get to know a gifted genius or an average Joe. Pick their brain but not their nose. Now here's your host. It's me, your host, Jacob Garr. It's February 14th, Valentine's Day, and what better way to spend Valentine's Day than with the ones you love? I am here with my grandmother, Maxine Garr, and Grandma, I have one question for you today. Do you want to be on my podcast?
That's why I'm here.
Excellent. Well, let's get started. I understand today you've got some interesting pieces of Garr family history here for us. Tell us a little bit about what's going on with our family history.
Well, actually, I've got, instead of Garr, I'm doing my side of the family, which is Jones.
Oh, the Joneses.
Joneses and the Bothwells and the Lows. And that's, the Bothwell and Lows are my mother, and the Jones part is my dad. And he started out, I can kind of go through the lineage and how, and one reason I wanted to do this was because I thought this might have tie in with what's going on in our world today with immigrants. And none of us would be here except for immigrants. And the first immigrant in my family was a man named Ludwig Grant. And he was a Jacobite back in the 1600s and 1700s in Scotland. And he came here, he was in servitude, which meant he had been arrested and put in prison in England. Then he came here on a boat to be in servitude. That's just like slavery for 7 years to work off his crime, I guess. And then
what did he do?
He was a rebel. He was a Jacobite, and he was in a group that was trying to get the Scottish former Scottish king, reinstated as king.
Do you know kind of the reason why he was pushing to get him as king?
Well, there was a lot of turmoil over there at that time, and there was quite a group of Jacobites, and they arrested them all. Of course, that guy didn't get to be king of England because of that. Yeah, he was kind of a rebel himself. Yeah, I think his name was James II. Was who they were trying to replace, and that was
very kingly name.
Yeah, that was in the 1700s, early 1700s, I think, when they did that. And now, pardon me. After he got out of servitude, he started working for the governor of the colony of South Carolina, North Carolina, as a trader with the Cherokees. And this is how the Indian blood came into our family. He married a woman from the Longhair clan, or the Wolf clan. They're not just sure which, but her name was spelled Eughiooote. And they gave her an English name. I think they gave her Elizabeth as an English name.
It's a little bit different,
but you pronounced her name Eughiote.
Eughiote. Huh. And you said he was a trader. I think we were talking earlier at lunch. You said that he was honored among the natives.
Yeah, according to what I got off the computer, since I misplaced my book on him, that he was considered one of the most honest traders with the Cherokees, between the Cherokees and the colonists, and they honored him. Everybody that had testimonies about him, I have that on here somewhere. But he was respected. He was a respected man. And they have a history in South Carolina in a probate book. And in it, he has been quoted as saying, "It has been 30 years since I went to Cherokee country, where I have resided ever since. I speak their language." But I figure that he kind of was a liaison between the government and the Cherokees.
Yeah.
And he was kind of a spy because he let the English government know what the Indians were up to. It's
probably part of his servitude.
Yeah, it was he was free by then.
Oh, okay.
He was making money as a trader then.
And then probably had some information on the side.
Yeah, he was the first. He is regarded as the first white to marry into the Cherokees.
Really?
Yeah, his daughter is considered the ancestress of so many Cherokees that a huge proportion of 1/3 to 1/2 of Cherokees count Grant as one of their ancestors.
Oh, that's insane.
It's insane. It's a huge family. I have communication with different people that over the years, that are turned out to be cousins.
Yeah,
that
probably
are all
a
over
heck of a family reunion.
Yeah, it would be. And they used to get together at this school in Oklahoma that my grandfather Cole, who was not Indian, he was not my grandfather, he was my great-grandfather. He gave the land and the building for a little country school. It was a little rock school, and the Indian side of the family used to meet there every year in the fall. And get
as a
together,
reunion spot?
As a reunion. And since then, that building's burned down.
Oh, that's unfortunate.
But I can trace them back, and I have some interesting stories about some of my relatives. They weren't all romantic figures.
Yeah.
There was one named Rich Jovan that had a mansion in Dalton, Georgia, which still stands. And he was driven out of that onto the Trail of Tears when they took over, when the white people took over for the gold.
My God.
They came into his house, and if you go, I was there, but it was locked the day I was there. It wasn't open, the museum. But according to my brother, there's burned in the upstairs gallery where they threw torches to drive his family out. They drove them out with the clothes on their back.
Oh my God!
They gave up they have a beautiful house. It's still there. A big property they had orchards.
Yeah.
And they owned a mill. They owned a ferry. I mean, he was really rich.
Yeah.
But he had to give all that up. And I think he got away with money because he did go back along the way on the Trail of Tears and built businesses along the way.
It was because of his native relation that he was chased out.
Rich Jovan, because he was native. He was like, I don't know if I'd have to go through the family tree here to put him in the right. But he had a lot of Indian blood. And so he was considered Indian.
I wonder why it took that long until they had actually chased him away. You know, he built his fortune.
Oh, well, they lived there. The Indians, North Carolina still has Cherokee, where the Cherokees that didn't run, that hid in the mountains and waited till the whites gave up on them.
Everything blew over.
Yeah, and they still have their reservation or their community there. And they put on historical plays and different things there. But they hid out. The other people didn't have enough sense to hide out, I guess. They were trusting the whites, which was a mistake.
That was a poor choice.
Yeah. And so he had these businesses which he had to give up, but he ended up having businesses in Oklahoma too.
Yeah.
But he was called Rich Jovan because he was rich, but he also owned slaves. And he was not a nice slave master. The story says that he burnt one of his slaves at the stake.
Oh my God.
For accusing them of stealing or something. So he was not a nice man.
No.
Not a nice man at all. Anyway, to go on, there's another one in the family called Crazy Joe. And he's part of that family too.
Wait, no, Crazy Joe, is that Rowdy Joe?
No, that's...
we got
that's another family. That's in this family.
Okay.
Crazy Joe was related to Rich Joe. I had a picture of him here. And he...
It's quite the naming convention.
Yeah, well, I think I'm not sure if he's the one that owned a steamboat. One of them owned a steamboat. And this is Rich Joe Van. He was a handsome man.
Yeah, it's a nice coif of hair.
Yeah, and... I don't know where that one is. Anyway, Crazy Joe died or killed his father, one or the other.
Oh, okay. So that's where the name comes from? Or
Van,
did he do more than that?
Van comes from Rich Joe Van, and actually Van comes from Scotland and England too.
Okay, so that all relates to the...
It all relates to the Native American. Yeah, and Ludwig Grant was he was sort of an aristocrat or royalty. He was, I think, a baronet or something, which was taken away from him when he was sent to prison. But there is a castle over there
Castle where?
In Scotland. We've got a lot of castles in the background, but it's called Castle Grant, and it still is standing in Scotland.
Oh, very nice. Has anybody in the family been able to visit?
Not that I know of. Not that I know of. But,
yeah.
He had possibly 2 wives. They're not sure. It wasn't uncommon for people to have more than one wife in the Indian tribes. It said either a typo or a long hair clan or the wolf clan. It didn't give the other names of the other woman.
Oh, okay. And this wasn't like a breakup, get together.
No, they would have kept on probably. And so here we go with the lineage. Ludwig Grant married this woman named Ikuti or Ikuti. I can't even pronounce it. I think it's Ikuti was her name, and she was also called Tassel. Somebody in there.
She'd earned that name.
Yeah, it was related. One of the Indians was Tassel, was their name. But I'm going to go backwards on this and bring us up to the future. So Ludwig Grant was born in Scotland, and he was born in 1696, April the 12th, which is Grandpa and Maya's anniversary.
Oh, wow.
Anyway, in Aberdeenshire, Scotland, and he died in 1755 in Charleston, South Carolina. On July the 19th, they think, 58. They've got books that show that his death was then. He was a soldier and a spy for the governor. That's what I think he was.
Yeah, that's the thing that makes closest sense when they
it
say
does kind of, yeah. I mean, it was just the white attitude.
Yeah.
You know. So Ludwig Grant, and then he married Ikuti. And then from there we have, this was the 10th generation from me. Then we have William Emery, who married Mary Grant. And then we have Richard Fields, who was 8th generation, and he came from England. And they're really, the Fields family are still powerful, and the Vans also in the Cherokee tribes in Oklahoma.
Oh, to this day.
To this day, they are citizens of renown, kind of. Some of them are. And there was another woman named Susanna, born Sonakui, who was in that tree too, in part of that 8th generation. And then the 7th generation was John Fields, born Cherokee Nation of East Tennessee, and his wife Elizabeth Wickett. And then they had Alexander Sanders and Peggy Sonakui, and this I think is her. This is Peggy Winters.
Sonakui.
Peggy Winters. Yeah, Sonakui Winters. She would be the 7th generation. And then Tiana Fields was married to John Winters, I believe, and had a son named Johnson Van Jr. She was married to John Van.
Okay.
But she had then John Winters and Jenny Sanders are in there somewhere too in that 6th generation. Then we have William Harrison Cole, who was married John. Well, he was tied into Johnson Van.
Okay.
And then we're getting back up here now into my territory. Nanny Van. She married Daniel Boone Cole, and that was my great grandmother. And Daniel Boone Cole was in 1856 in Kentucky, and she was raised in an orphanage, and her parents apparently died. I think it was too far past the Trail of Tears for them to die there, but that's why she was raised in an orphanage to a certain point. But some of the chiefs, and I can't remember
because of the Trail of Tears, she was raised an orphan.
Well, that's the family tale.
Yeah,
but I think it happened
somewhere after.
It was after the Trail of Tears,
but kind of direct after.
It might have been a direct of it. They don't know for sure what they died of.
Oh.
And then there's George Lafayette Jones, who is my dad's father, who married Lorena Cole. And Lorena Cole was Nanny Van's daughter. That's how she's tied into the Vans. Lorena Cole. And she had a sister who gave birth to it. She gave birth to a girl and died the same day.
Died during childbirth?
Yes, and my grandmother raised her, and she's a cousin that died here recently, lived up here. But they also had a child named Willie. This girl, the baby was named Willie, and they had lost their child named Willie. And I understood she was killed in an accident. They were in a horse and wagon, and bounced and
she fell out.
Fell out.
Oh no!
That was a story I heard. And then Grandma raised her niece Willie, and I always thought of her as a sister. And then my dad, and his name was Cornelius L. Jones. He would never say what the L was for, but I'm sure it was Lafayette.
Oh, yeah.
Because of his dad.
Interesting.
Yeah, and then after...
Do you know why he wouldn't say the L? Or?
I don't know. He just never would admit to it.
Huh.
Never would admit to it. I mean, I think Lafayette's just as good as Cornelius.
Right.
Most people called him Neil.
Neil?
Yeah. Most people called him Neil. So then from my dad, who married my mother, Jenny Ann Bothwell, which is the other tie-in here.
Right, and that's Jenny, Jennie, like my sister.
Right, like your sister.
The namesake.
And there's a whole bunch of Jennies in this family. I mean,
really?
There's Jenna, Jennifer, Jenny. All of these kids were named after her.
Wow.
After Grandma Jenny.
That's amazing.
It is.
So those were every one of those names was inspired by, Jennifer, Jenna, and Jenny?
Yeah, they were from my mother.
Wow.
And then, let's see here. In my family then, in the line, and I haven't included you guys because you are all in that line too. In my family is me, Maxine, Gertrude Maxine Jones, Ben Allen Jones, Marvin Jones, Lucille Bell Jones Bell, Eileen Jones Boffman, Margaret Jones, and Danny Jones.
That's the cast I know.
That's 7 of us.
Yeah.
And they lost one baby. My folks did. Her name was Nancy. Yeah.
What age?
At 1 month. She was born with blunt ends of her esophagus, and they couldn't repair them in those days. She was born at KU, and they refused to try. My dad begged them to try to fix it, and they refused to do it. And then they wanted to do an autopsy, and he wouldn't let them. But the main reason I wanted to talk about this was the fact that we have all this immigration thing going on right now, and we were built on that. The Statue of Liberty has that saying on it, "Give me your tired, you're poor." And forever we've been open to immigration, and I think
it's kind of our bread and butter with this country.
It is, and all those immigrants, there's so many of them that did wonderful things, just like these Englishmen that came over and intermarried the Indians. They did great things too to help build up the early United States, which wasn't even. It was before the war, before the revolution.
Right.
These guys were, so they all had something to do with our government,
And now the government's kind of poo-pooing all that.
Yeah, they're poo-pooing it, and it's really important when you look back at how many people. These people, the Van name came from England, the Grant name came from England.
Yeah, that's
in Scotland, and
a lot of etymology.
Yeah, there's a lot of tie into that. This is my grandparents, my dad's mother and dad, Lorena and George. This is her parents, Nanny Van.
I've seen that photo multiple times.
And Daniel Boone. I've got it hanging in the house. Jenna transposed.
And she was you said almost full blood native Cherokee?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this one was too. Pretty much. You can see by looking at her.
Yeah.
This is Peggy Winters. And she's got other names too. And several of them, it's hard to trace them because there were more than one husband and more than one wife to a lot of these guys. And some of them, like Daniel Boone Cole, his wife died. Nanny Van died, and he married another woman. So we've got half brothers and sisters involved in that lineage there somewhere, which I don't know any
How
of
that falls in.
Yeah. And Rich Joe, he was born in February of 1798 at Spring Place, Georgia.
Spring Place, huh?
And he's the guy that you can go to Georgia, and you can, if you go on any day but Monday, you can get in to tour that house, which still stands there. I have a picture of it.
And so you went, wait, was that the one, that's not the mansion, right? The one you said you couldn't get into?
That's the mansion.
Or that's the mansion?
That's the mansion.
So you hadn't seen the inside, but you'd seen the exterior?
Seen the exterior.
How's it look? Like, what's it?
It's a beautiful brick house. I forget what the style is, like Greek, whatever. It's brick and it has columns, not like the big...
not like these Grecian pillars.
Yeah, not like the plantations. It's not like that.
Oh, right.
But it was like, it just had white square kind of columns in front.
I see.
Yeah. Now then, I've tied that into that.
Yeah, and we had Crazy Joe.
Crazy Joe.
Did we find out why he was crazy?
I don't know why he was crazy, but I think it was because of a shooting.
The shooting where he killed it,
and who he killed. I thought I had that right here handy. That aggravates me. I thought I had that all laid out here.
Oh no, that's okay.
But but he was an influential, good-looking person, rich. This guy, and he's the one that burned the slave at the stake.
Right. So
and,
a lot of complicated feelings there. But.
Right. And the other guy, dang it, I have his picture right here. I can't remember who he shot. If he was shot by his father or he shot his father accidentally. Anyway, I think that's why they called him Crazy Joe. But he may have been the one that owned the steamboat. And he was an alcoholic. He drank a lot and partied. And he had a party like on the steamboat. And they were going up the river and he wanted to go faster. So he had a slave man that stoked the fires. And the guy told him the engine's are going to blow up if we keep pushing it. And he said, go ahead anyway.
Let's sink this party.
He said, and they did. They sunk the party and everybody drowned.
Oh my God.
Except the slave and the mule, I think is what the story was.
Well, good for him. I mean, the guy that survived it all. Hopefully he had a better life from there.
Yeah.
Wow.
Here he is.
I've never heard that story before.
This artist's rendition of him is pretty wild looking. He looks wild and crazy.
This is Chief Crazy James?
Yeah, see, and he was a chief too. Chief Crazy James Van. He was married to Elizabeth Hicks and Margaret Scott, and a bigamist by American standards. He was. And his mother's name was Wya Lee, which I think may have been actually the other woman. They aren't all clear on this, and it's really hard to trace them because they did have more than one wife and lots of kids. So it was kind of hard to trace them.
Trace those back, yeah.
Yeah, James Van built the home that you speak of, actually overlooking the Moravian mission that had been built and named Spring Place. The Van house right now in Dalton, Georgia is open for people to view.
He was the one to go down with the ship, right?
Yeah.
That's wild. It's kind of like Titanic, but instead of an iceberg, it's a party that just got out of control.
Yeah. This guy's name is Joseph. Anyway, so that's where the Indian enters in.
Okay.
To our history. And if you want to get, I've got
for the Jones anyway, right?
From the Jones side. And if you want to get your Indian number, I've got the information for that somewhere.
Oh yeah, I was needing to get on that.
Well, what you need, I needed my father's death certificate and my grandmother's Indian number. Anyway, that's how I got it. But each time, as it goes down to generations, Taryn's got hers.
You do?
Cool. Here's the card.
You got yours.
This is the original card, yeah. And this is my dad's number here. This was.
Now, what would we like? There's percentages, right, that you get tested?
Oh yeah, the Cherokees are pretty lenient about that. They are. Yeah. You see, there's my dad's official number, right there, Cornelius Jones, and that's his Indian number.
Oh yeah, so you actually have his licensing. Oh, there's yours. My cousin's here in the studio too, Taryn. Oh yeah, it's lovely.
Anyway, yeah, I've got a picture ID too.
1/28. I'm guessing that's what I'd be clocking in at.
Yeah. So now then...
What is that fraction-wise? That's a lot of decimal points.
It's practically nothing. I have a friend I took a class with that really looks Native American.
Yeah.
But his family took him off the Dawes rolls because that was the government thing to find out how many Indians and to take the kids away and put them into Christian schools where they beat the Indian out of them, cut their hair, refused to let them speak their language, and dress
right.
Indian.
What are they?
The Christian schools where they had a special name.
It's terrible.
Yeah.
It was,
so anyway, his grandparents took his parents off of the rolls because they didn't want him taken away. So he called himself a nosebleed Indian.
Nosebleed Indian, huh?
It was the blood that ran from the nosebleed that was his Indian blood.
Oh.
I mean, I think that's hilarious.
Yeah.
And these are all just papers, but I could fix you up with that if you want to do it. Kara just did it for them.
Certainly, yeah. So, I definitely want to do that.
And then the other side, which is, and they had the
we're going to the other side now.
Yeah, this is the Bothwell Lau, Lowe, Lau. And by the way, my great grandfather Daniel Boone Cole fought on the side of the Confederates. In matter of fact, the Cherokees all fought on the side of the Confederates, and there was even an Indian man that was a general in that war.
Oh, wow.
And
I had no idea.
They did that, I think, because they were not happy with the way the government was treating them.
Yeah.
Anyway.
I could see that.
Yeah. So
it'll be just one moment. We're going to hop into the Bothwells and Laus now.
The Bothwell side was my mother's side, and the Lau was my... No, that's not true. The Bothwell side was my mother's father's side, and Lau was my mother's side of that family.
I see.
So the Bothwells were born... Thomas Bothwell is the first person I've got here back in the history.
He was earliest traceable.
Yeah, he was born in 1818 in Tyrone County, Ireland. And I'm not sure if they came over here because of the potato famine. I'm not sure when that was, but that's what drove a lot of Irish people. They starved to death.
Yeah, so... During
Queen Victoria's reign, that happened. And then the next person in line is my grandfather, Lawrence Bothwell, who your dad is named after.
Oh, yeah.
Your dad is named after him.
So Lawrence Bothwell, huh?
Uh-huh. Lawrence M. Bothwell. He was born in 1872 in Monroe County, Ohio. That's after his ancestors. And I think there was quite a few family members in that the originals that came over, but she didn't list them here. And he married my grandmother, who was Carrie Lau. Ann Twynham Oakey was his mother. And then we have Jenny Ann Bothwell, who is his daughter.
Jenny Ann Bothwell. And now is that spelled... that was my grandma Jenny. So yeah, that's her.
Great grandma Jenny.
So this was 1875 then, is when the Bothwells kind of entered?
1818.
1818.
Yeah, June of 1818.
Oh, but Lawrence was 1875.
That's when he was born.
Yeah.
In Ireland.
So he was the first born in America, was it?
Lawrence was.
Yeah.
Lawrence was 1872. He was
72.
born. He was born, I think, April 4th, 1900. No, that's not right. Oh, that wouldn't work, would it? He died in 1950. I thought he was older than 50 when he died. But anyway,
but he died a little bit earlier than that, huh?
Yeah. See, his mother was Ann Twynham Oakey, and she was from Portersdown County, Ireland. And she died in 1855 and was born in 1833. So they were after the Revolution. They came over later. Then Jenny Ann was my mother. She was born in Iowa, Spirit Lake, Iowa. And she died April the 12th. That's another 12th anniversary. April the 12th, like this was April the 12th of one of these dates in our anniversary. in 1988 here, and she died in Independence. Then, on the Lau side, Thomas Andrew Lau was my mother's grandfather, who fought in the Civil War on the Yankee side when he was 16. And he's the one, the book, A Rowdy Joe Lau, that you've read.
Yeah.
That was his cousin. Rowdy Joe was Thomas's cousin.
See.
I thought he was his brother, but it said he was the cousin. And he was quite the guy. I mean, they've got a museum in Ellsworth, Kansas, where he had a shootout.
Yeah, notorious gambler and fighter, and what you kind of imagine when you
ran
think
a
of Wild
whorehouse.
West.
He ran a whorehouse, and he married one of his prostitutes. And he was shot. And he was a friend to Kit Carson and some of these people.
To Kit Carson?
Yeah.
Oh wow.
It was anyway. Kit thought of him highly, I guess. So that speaks not too well of Kit Carson.
right. That doubles back on him.
Yeah, but my great grandfather was quite a character. And his wife was named Liza Jane, and she was probably about as high as you and your mom, and a little feist.
My cousin.
She ran the
She's about
roost.
what, 5'2"?
Maybe
5'2"?
5. Yeah, something like
Somewhere in.
that. And then her husband was a soft-hearted man, but she was a tough-hearted lady.
Yeah, she had the bite.
Well, she ruled her kids. They went to school, and they came home from school. They put on an apron. They swept the floors. They did the dishes. They did the housework. She didn't do it. She had her daughters, and that was Grandma Carrie. That was her daughter.
Mm-hmm.
But she sent the kids, they'd done something bad, something that she considered bad, and she said, you go to the barn and have Daddy, Papa, spank you, punish you.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he gets them out behind the barn. This is a story Grandma told.
I think I've heard this too.
Yeah, and he slapped his leg, and he told her, holler real loud. And he'd slap his leg. And he sent the hired man over to the neighbors to pick up some kind of oil that didn't exist. And the neighbor said, oh, Tom Lau's pulling your leg. There's no such thing. So this guy peed in the bottle and took it back. Got back at the grandpa for it. He sent him after a left-handed monkey wrench and different things like that. He was just a jokester.
Yeah, constant prankster. So Thomas was too? I thought.
Yeah, Thomas Lau.
Thomas Lau. And then Rowdy Joe was too, from what I understand.
Well, Rowdy Joe was, but he was not. They weren't that close. I mean, these people lived in Pennsylvania. They came down from Pennsylvania and lived in Republic, Kansas, which is just right next to the Nebraska line.
Oh, yeah.
That's where a lot of cousins stuff still live up there in Republic County, Kansas. But,
cool.
Anyway, another thing Grandpa did, I think it was my Grandma Carrie went in the house crying and saying, Papa cussed at me. She was crying and her mother said, well, what? Grandma Lau said, what's the matter? And she said, Papa cussed at me. And she said, what did he say? And he said, go to the house, my lady. That's as tough as he ever got.
That's as bad as he got. Huh?
Yeah, and so she thought he'd cussed at her.
She thought that was the worst thing ever, huh? Because he was just that soft to the kid.
Yeah. So, and Thomas's wife was Eliza Jane Young, and here comes Jenny again. Yeah. She went by Jenny.
Interesting.
And she named my mother Jenny.
Okay.
And that's how the Jenny got started. Well, there's another Jenny back here in the family, too. She was born in Republic, Kansas, Carrie Bothwell was, and died in Huntsville, Arkansas. She kind of died a long ways away, and she buried in Hardy, Nebraska. Eliza Jane Young was her mother, Jenny. And Mother named herself. Mother gave her middle name herself. My mother did.
Mm.
Then it's got this down wrong. They put Jenny in here. Mother's name was never Eliza Jane Young. Her mother was Jenny. Married Cornelius L. Jones. So that's kind of mixed up.
Yeah. But you got it in order.
Yeah, sort of, yeah. So I'm looking for Jenny. Oh, Eliza O'Lafferty. It was not Jenny.
Eliza O'Lafferty.
Oh, she came from Ireland, and I don't know if I should mention this on here. You can edit it out.
No,
if
you can
want.
certainly mention it. Yeah.
Well, the reason she came to America was because she was a Protestant girl, and the Catholic priest was after her to have relations with her. So her family sent her to Lena, Illinois. And I think she was only a teenager. She was born in 1822, and she died in 1908. She was just a teenager, and I think she had $17 to her name.
At the time.
When she came over. And she's buried up in Illinois somewhere.
Wow.
That was neat. And here's my grandfather's fancy horse.
Oh, look at that horse and buggy ride.
Yeah, that's the way they went to church. That was their limousine.
That's pretty nice. Those are some well-crafted wheels.
Yeah. Yeah. The horses have these fringes on them. Can you see the fringe on the horse?
Oh wow! So they made quite the fanfare. When
they were quite the thing, and they were upstanding citizens of the area there. They came down from him and Carrie, I think, married in Ohio or somewhere. They came from Eliza Jane came from that on the train out to where in Kansas where they were, which wasn't quite as primitive as on the the Life on the Prairie stories they did on TV. With
like Little House on the Prairie.
Little House on the Prairie. Wasn't quite that far back, but they had to homestead there. And my grandfather, his old house still stands. It's a ruin up there, and I've been in it. And I don't think I took anything from it, but Aunt Margaret took doors and all kinds of stuff out of it.
Oh, wow.
But he had the first indoor toilet in the neighborhood. He had the first electricity. He had a windmill that generated electricity. And that bathroom was just like...
So he kept up with the Joneses.
Well, or ahead of them.
Yeah.
And the neighbors thought it was atrocious that you had a toilet inside your house.
Oh, right. I guess that is kind of a foreign concept when you had it removed from the whole situation.
He was kind of a modern man.
Yeah.
So how we got to
Early
be
adopter.
Bothwells... Mm-hmm. Here's how this is the story of the Bothwell come. Is a place name which, according to Ripley's, believe it or not, originated in southeast Scotland in 1398. When Archibald the Grim prepared to build a church. This is the story. Because we used to think that we were descended from Lord Bothwell. Yeah. But Lord Bothwell never married, and so if we're his direct descendants, we're all bastards. Because he was never married.
But
he did. I think he might have impregnated Queen Mary, because one of the Bothwells was kind of her consort that she didn't marry. But anyway, he ordered that he ordered two people to shoot arrows in the air, and he ordered that the arrows be shot in the air, and the farthest one was to determine the site for the church. Both landed side by side to determine the site. And Archibald the Grim exclaimed, "Both well shot."
Oh, okay.
Both well is how the name came about. The church and the neighboring village have been called Bothwell ever since.
Wow.
There is also a Bothwell Castle at Bothwell Bridge and a Bothwell Parish in Scotland.
That's fascinating.
The church was built in an era, and here's another picture of Grandpa with his mules. It was built in the era when surnames were first coming into use. Many of the people of this area took the name Bothwell for their surnames. James Hepburn, who married Queen Mary of Scotland, was the Earl of Bothwell. After his death, his nephew became Earl of Bothwell. Our line of Bothwells migrated from Scotland to Ireland, then to the United States. Thomas Bothwell, the progenitor of our line of the Bothwells in this country, was born in Ireland in 1818. He came to America in 1840. He was a school teacher in Tyrone County before coming to this country. He went first to Carrollton, Ohio. Family tradition says that he wanted to be near his Uncle George. Carroll County records show that he married Mary Shepherd in Carroll County. We do not know when he left Carroll County, but the census records show him to be in Monroe County in 1850.
So are we one of the Bothwells that would be like just named because of the
village?
Place?
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
And now a lot of people were adopting that as their last name.
That's when they first started having surnames. I don't know what they call people. Hey, you, I guess. Or maybe they had a first name, but no last name, no familiar name. But a lot of times they were named Carpenter because they were carpenters.
Oh, right. It was
Mason,
a trade.
Yeah, Mason because they were stonemasons and so forth. Smith because they were a smith, either a blacksmith or a metal smithy, silversmith. That's how those names came about. And so I guess they just adopted that because their church was there and it was called
They were about town.
The Bothwell Church. So they all were Bothwells.
Interesting.
And they may have had other titles, to go with it if they had other roles. But that was when they first came into being, names.
Wow.
I never thought of that for a long time and how names came to be because I guess in the Stone Age nobody had a name.
Right, it was Ugg.
Yeah. Ugg. But anyway, I don't know what else I can tell you about that.
So that let's see, that was the Bothwells and the Lows.
Yeah, the Lows was Thomas Low, and then the Bothwells went back to that. Now Thomas Low, I don't know if she had anything here. Here's a thing showing you my grandfather was an upstanding man of the neighborhood. L.M. Bothwell, duty to attend the annual meeting. Head of Jewell County Association, says the member has a fourfold responsibility. That was him. L.M. Bothwell, for 10 years, the president of Jewell County, Kansas, NFLA.
Made quite the name for himself, huh?
Yeah, he was. They were all, involved in their community.
So
Lawrence Mays was his name, and everybody called him Lon, L-O-N, Lon.
Lon, huh?
And when I was a little girl, before Uncle Marvin was born, my mother sent me up there, and Alan, up there for Grandma to keep while she was hospitalized and what have you.
Yeah.
Because she was recovering. She had the little girl that died and lived only a month. And then right away she got pregnant with Marvin, so she was run down and, needed to not have to chase after two rambunctious kids.
Right.
So she sent us up there, and Grandma, were you at the family reunion when we got Grandpa's old car out, the old Model T?
Model T? No, but I'd seen pictures from that.
Those cousins. That was my mother's brother's kids refurbished that old car that he had, and he was proud of it. And I rode in that car when I was a little girl of 3.
Wow.
That was when I was.
Do you have a memory of that?
Oh yeah, they took us to town, and I was a very bashful kid, like this. Wouldn't look at people
and everything.
I wouldn't look at people, and Grandma was buying me a sweater, and she bought, and I think she was about ready to not buy me anything because she was aggravated at me for being such a klutz. And then she got us both rubber dollies, Alan and I both. And we played around out in the farmyard, and we left our dolls by the gate where Grandpa was out farming. Yeah. And when he came in, he found them. And Grandma punished us by taking them away from us for a while.
What was that?
Because we didn't take care of our dolly babies. We left them
out. Because of leaving them out.
Yeah. She was teaching us a lesson. And Alan was only 2. And Grandma had one of those little step stools about this tall. Alan would climb up on the first step and say, look at me. And he'd jump off. He thought he was real brave. He thought he was real brave. Now great. I was ornery. And she put us down on her sun porch, was a screened-in porch, to take naps. And she had a storm cellar. You know what a storm cellar is? Yeah. It's a big mound of earth and a hole cut in the ground with a lid, a door, to store things for the winter, like cabbage and canned
jars of jelly and all that good
things
stuff.
like that. She had flowers planted on it. Well, I got up off of the porch and went out and picked flowers and rubbed them in the screen. Oh, in the screen door. Huh? Yes, and she got after me for that. And then Grandpa had these tickets. You had to fill out these tickets for your gas, and I don't know how that farmers' gas allotments worked, but my dad had those tickets too. Anyway, he had this whole tablet of tickets, and she had me in that room to take a nap. I got into his ticket book with a pencil and marked every page up with
Oh, no.
with pencil. And I heard him say, "What is Jenny Ann teaching this child?"
Did that invalidate the tickets, or were they still feasible?
I think he could still use them.
Yeah.
If he just wrote over it. I don't know how much scribbling I did.
Yeah. It was with a pencil, though.
Yeah.
You can probably use an eraser.
Probably he could maybe easily do it by putting something between them, but I aggravated him greatly. But anyway, so anyway, he was born in Ohio, and John Twynham was his uncle, and they lived near Hardy, Nebraska, is where Grandma was buried now, and Superior, Nebraska is where my cousin Lawrence, Lawrence, who was named after our grandfather too. It's where he lives.
Oh, okay.
Anyway, later he and his brother James, Jim, they called him Jim Bothwell, farmed for themselves on a farm 6 miles south of Hardy. In 1896, the brothers had a big corn crop. They picked it and hauled it to Weber, where they sold it for 15 cents a bushel.
15 cents a bushel, huh?
That's not very much money.
No.
George Higgins, who operated the elevator, said that they could not dump the wagons as fast as the farmers brought the corn. At one time, the wagons of corn were lined up as far as the cemetery, which was 1/2 mile south of the elevator. April 4th, 1900, Lon Bothwell married Carrie Lau. After their marriage, Lon and Carrie went to Spirit Lake, Iowa, where for a short time they lived on a farm. They moved across the state line into Jackson County, Minnesota. Carl and Harold were born in Minnesota, and the family moved back to the farm near Spirit Lake, Iowa, where Jenny was born. She was born in Spirit Lake. Now, my uncle Carl was a teacher, and he taught there in Kansas. And both of those old uncles lived to be 98.
Wow.
And my mother's brothers.
That's impressive.
Harold was a farmer. He stayed in the area and farmed all his life. Uncle Carl taught. And he started teaching in Kansas, and then he moved to Washington and taught on Yakima Indian Reservation.
Oh, wow.
And he was a bigoted old buzzard. I loved the old man.
But he still taught on the reservation, regardless of him being...
yeah, he was hired by the government to teach.
But he wasn't thrilled about it?
No, he just didn't. He was nice enough on the surface to the Indians, but he talked about them in a derogatory manner. And this was later I found out, because when I was a little girl, I thought he was the most wonderful man.
Yeah.
But when we went up to Washington to visit him, I was in the laundromat and met some of his former students, and they really liked him. Mm-hmm. And they gave him privileges of fishing for salmon that most people, white people, couldn't have.
Not with the res.
But he didn't think that Indians should celebrate their heritage. He thought they ought to assimilate like the rest of the immigrants.
Oh, my goodness.
But they weren't immigrants. The Indians were the first people to move in here. And that's one thing that I am adamant about, is the way the Indians have been treated, still are treated.
Still, yeah.
And looked down on. The government cheats them out of stuff all the time. And the BIA, in my opinion, the Bureau of Indian Affairs, is a white man's organization, because they side with the white in the government rather than really benefiting the Indians.
It's just a way to liaison and pretend like something's...
I think so. Yeah. That's how my opinion is about them. Mm. I've voiced that before, and a lot of the Native Americans that communicate with me agree with it. And people who...
It would seem that way.
Who call them lazy and everything, we made them lazy because we pinned them up on land that was no good and took away all their buffalo and stuff that they hunted. And so things that they did to live, their traditions and everything, were destroyed. And that's why so many of them are alcoholics. And one of the reasons is the white man pushes the alcohol on them, because it made them ineffective.
Right.
They became addicted to alcohol.
Yeah, they've really screwed people over.
They did. And they talk about it. The people that are near the reservations look down on the Native Americans a lot. But anyway, they ended up back in Kansas
They did. So yeah, your mother, was it?
She was raised there.
In Iowa. You guys went to.
She was born to Iowa, and then they moved right back to Republic County or Hardy, Nebraska. They lived in Hardy. They lived on a farm outside of that in Republic County.
I see.
And then when he died, Grandma bought a little house in town, and she was a widow.
Hmm.
So.
Wow.
And my mother was a nurse.
Your mother was a nurse, and you're a nurse.
Yeah, and my mother was like 16 when she graduated from high school. So she was too young to go into nurses training, so she taught school with a high school education.
Really?
And they didn't require that much from teachers.
Oh, that's fascinating. What did she teach?
Just great, like country school or...
You teach the whole
whole thing. She taught everything. Till she got to be 18, and then she went into nurses.
And then she went to nursing when she became.
And that's how she met my father. She graduated from McPherson, Kansas Nursing School.
Mm-hmm.
She had to take some of her training in Chicago, where she made a mistake with the dose of milk of magnesia, and they wrote her up for it. And it was a big deal, the milk of magnesia.
Yeah.
She had a letter from her dad sympathizing with her and, telling her to buck up. But then she got her license and she went to Goodland, Kansas, where she worked in the hospital. And my dad came to the hospital for appendicitis and operated on him. And that's how they met.
Wow.
And started dating after that. And I've got love letters that he wrote her. It's kind of neat.
Oh, that's amazing.
I should have brought
those.
Have
those.
I still have them at the house.
Oh, that's amazing. And what inspired you to become a nurse? Was it her? Or...
Her, kind of, yeah. And I'm bent that way. I think sometimes we're born with certain proclivities to be a certain way. And I am a person who likes to take care of people, I guess, and fix things. Yeah. That's why I'm volunteering at the school, why I was a Sunday school teacher. Yeah. I was a nurse. I was in Scouts. Bus driver around kids again.
You've had an interesting career.
Yeah, career line.
A whole spread.
Well, actually, the first job I ever had was babysitting.
Yeah.
The second job I had was kind of babysitting for the lady who gave me my scholarship to nurses training. I took care of her. She had three grandchildren there, and they were from California. And her husband was a Kansas state senator, the lady that gave my scholarship. So that was my second job for one summer. She gave me that job to earn money because she gave me the scholarship. And then my next job was just being a student, but I worked after I got into like my third year of nursing. I did night duty on the floor with an orderly and a nurse's aide.
What hours would you typically work? Is that like overnight?
Overnight.
Yeah.
Like 11 to 7.
11 to 7.
Yeah. And they had supervisors in the hospital, and the supervisors, well, if we had to give pain medicine, we had to clear it through them. And if we had trouble with our coworkers, we had to clear it through them. But I was in charge of a 40-bed ward, and I wasn't even 20 yet. Were
you running around quite a bit?
Yeah, quite a bit. I mean, I had to give the medicines and all that and the shots and oversee these two people, and they had to do the grunt work for me. But they were always going off in the utility room and smoking. It was hard to find them sometimes.
Frustrating, yeah.
Yeah, I did that. Then after I got out, your grandfather, Roger, talked me into getting married before I graduated.
Yeah, and when did you meet him? That was like a friend of a friend?
Yeah, it was a blind date.
Yeah.
Well, actually, she wasn't really a friend. She was kind of a loose girl. But
Grandma.
Well, she was.
Woo, dishing it.
Everybody said, "Oh, you don't want to go out with her." Well, the guy she was dating was a friend of Grandpa's, and he didn't have enough money to pay for the date. So Grandpa loaned him the money, and then he had her find him a date, and that was me. And the girls all said, "Oh, you don't want to do that." And I said, "I'm going to do it. I'll carry my bandage scissors with me." And so turned out all right, but I was sunburned really bad from laying out in the sun. I got a bad sunburn, and it was cool, and I was cold. I was shivering. Grandpa was into the game. He never even noticed. But his friend gave me his coat. So that's how we met. He was a good choice.
Yeah.
Grandpa was. He was a good man.
Grandpa, yeah, he was great.
He was a good choice. Yeah. And then so after, I was just a mother for quite a while till Kara was a baby, a toddler. Then I went to work, decided I needed to work. So I went to work for Elko Photo, and it was over by the old, the big Eiffel Tower that's over on 31st Street, the TV tower that stands up.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
They called it the EYE, Eiffel Tower, because it was changed. And I ran the color developer, which the girls would print these pictures off of the cameras, and you would have a roll this big around of pictures, and you loaded it in the dark.
You did the dark room?
I did the dark room, and you loaded this on a wheel, and you had to thread this paper that led it through there and watch it till it came out, and then you wanted to make sure the drum was hot enough to dry them off and all that. And I did that for quite a while.
Wow.
Then I had back trouble, and I quit doing that because every time I go to the chiropractor, my back would pop out the minute I lifted up on that splice. So I decided it wasn't too smart doing that, and I just wasted the money. I mean, I bought a lot of stuff with it, but I never really saved anything.
Oh, yeah.
And I was missing out on everything, like Kara's first steps and things like that. Aunt Eileen came and babysat for me. And that was another expense that I didn't need. And then I got my nursing. Let's see, did I do that first? No. Then I did the bus driving.
Bus driving, yeah.
And I did that because Grandpa was laid off from TWA. So we needed a little extra income.
That income going.
So I learned how to drive a school bus, and I did that for 3 or 4 years. And then I got to talking to a lady at church who was in charge of a nursing school at the Independent Sand for LPNs. And she said, I was in the RN program when I met Grandpa, but anyway, she said, get this book and take the tests in it. It's like a sample state board. And if you go, score lower than such and such, then you probably can't make it. But if you only have a couple of things that you don't score too good on, review those and take it again. And I could apply. They don't do this anymore. They gave me a waiver to go take the state boards for LPN 18 years after I'd been in school for nursing.
Oh, wow.
And I scored, like it was 700 possible. I scored 600 and some points on that test and passed it. So then I quit the bus driving and went to work in the hospital. And I worked at North Kansas City Hospital in different areas, med-surg, pediatrics, orthopedics.
And you worked for quite some time
I worked 15 years there.
15 years.
And then I decided it was getting harder and harder, the work was.
Yeah.
And I had a chance to sit on my butt and do a monitor, on the heart floor, just monitor all these people's
just to make sure
their
heart condition.
their Holter monitors and different things they had on. And I thought about it, and I would have got paid more, and it would have been easy, but it would have been boring.
Right, and you're not about that.
And I said no. So I put in an application at Kaiser because several of my nurse friends worked there. They said put in an application. So I did, and then I worked there for 10 years.
What did you do at Kaiser? You did
I worked in a pediatric clinic.
Pediatrics.
With one of the best doctors I know, Dr. Judy Waldman, and she's still on staff at Children's Mercy.
Oh, that's excellent.
And she's just a wonderful person.
I remember, weren't you working in the healthcare field, nursing, when we were kids, like me and my sister?
Yeah, I used to work.
It seemed like up until we were about, 7, maybe?
Maybe, because when you were born, your mom had C-section, and she had to have some wound care, and I would drive to your house, dress her wound, and do all that, and then drive back to Kaiser to go to work, which was over on Hillcrest at the time. So you were a baby then. So yeah, I worked there till, I was going to say, what year? I started there in 1975, so 15 years would have been What, 80, 90?
90?
90.
Yeah, 90. And I was born in 92.
Yeah.
So maybe a little over that then.
Oh, I worked past
that.
Yeah, yeah. Because I quit in 2000.
Oh, yeah. 2000.
So, yeah,
huh?
you were pretty good-sized kids.
Yeah, I would say.
17 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Doesn't seem possible.
No,
I kind of miss that. I miss the kids. I liked working with the kids.
Mm-hmm.
Although, if you got a kid with cancer, that was broken heart.
Like really rough.
It was sad. So, have you had enough stuff from me, Jake?
Oh, I can't. Well, we could go for days. You're so interesting to talk to. But yeah, we covered a lot today. Thank you so much for bringing all of this in. I didn't know about a lot of this.
But my main statement is that I want people to realize immigration is necessary to our country. You know, it's what those people that come in here. Some of them are so smart. They come in as doctors and they work as orderlies. I worked with one at North Kansas City.
Yeah.
He was a doctor, and until he could pass all the English tests, he couldn't practice as a doctor.
So much wasted potential.
He had to work as an orderly, you know that.
Xenophobia.
And he was most helpful to us, because if we had a problem come up, we'd go to him, and we'd say, "Hey, you know, what should we do about this, or what do you suggest here?" And then if he'd say, you need to call the doctor because blah blah blah, it's probably that. But he was a real good resource for us.
Yeah, and everybody's pretty much a genetic mutt in this country. Even the people who are, calling the shots on this stuff for some reason or another. But it is unfortunate that these things happen, that the governments really try to deny what really makes this country so great.
Yeah, it's sad. It's just worrisome.
It is.
And I don't want to be political on this, but I don't know. I guess you
but
can be.
I guess
if
it sort
you
of
want.
Is, in nature.
Yeah, it is. But I hope I covered enough.
You did, absolutely. It was. Thank you so much for coming in and sharing all of that with us.
Oh, I enjoyed it. I love to talk.
Oh, I know. We can talk forever.
Yeah.
I always enjoy our talks.
Yeah.
So I love you, Grandma.
Yeah.
Happy Valentine's Day.
Love you back.
Thanks. It's good to be loved
You're
back.
my best grandson.
That's right. And we were born on the same day and
That's
everything.
right. You were my best birthday gift. I always told you. Nobody ever worked so hard to give me a birthday gift as your mom did.
No, yeah. It was a pretty great present.
Yeah, it was.
Well,
and Jenny almost made it.
Yeah, she was close, a few days out.
Uh-huh.
So, Grandma, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And we'll talk to all you lovely people next week.
No, I just want to ask you a question.
Sure.